model is we have to learn that people are broken. We have to realize we have to model mercy, grace, and love. And we also have to learn how to communicate. How do we communicate? We suck at it. Human beings suck at communication. So then how do we go about that? That should be just a complete lesson on its own and being different, but you know, moving on. So, page 7, really quickly. Restoring, repairing, renewing. Really want you guys to look at this. Basically, knowing who God is in our lives and knowing our identity in God is really critical as we heal personally so we can teach others, or as others heal so they can receive the truth of God. And when we understand the truth of God, which is mercy, grace, and love, very simple, all of a sudden we can navigate the world a little bit easier in church. Our perception, we don't get too ruffled by things as we used to. Or we see it from another point of view and say, how can I help that person understand? Or understand that they're broken, like we all are, and how can I be more compassionate and empathetic for them?
I thought that was just growing old, an age
Is
thing.
that?
I thought it was just the older
old.
you know, 80-year-olds are like that.
Yeah.
Probably when they're in their 20s, there was just all sorts of resistance.
Totally, because we're right. I mean, you know, we're hot-headed, we're passionate, we got to be right. You know, I'm saying we, the royal we. And as you grow older, you know, you pick your battles.
Yeah. And you've seen it all.
And you've seen it all. You know, but then we were talking about a few 80-year-olds who can be judgmental, pain in the butt, that, you know, create a culture of like, I can't believe you said that. And so yeah, it varies, I guess. But accepting our gifts. So what I'd like you to do is go back to Appendix 3 and 4 in your notebook really quick. Any questions so far?
Do you have another one of those?
Yes, I'm loaded there, Steve.
I would appreciate having one.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
Just a little side thing on page 7.
Did I spell wrong?
No. I have an editor, but no. The paragraph about who are we in Christ, what does the Bible say about our identity? You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, people belonging to God. That's what turns my kids off. That kind of statement. So at the same time, it's what we say is our purpose. And at the same time, it sounds exclusive and excluding in some ways. We're the chosen ones. If you don't believe that way, you're not. So I just had to call it.
No, I'm glad you did. And I think what I want people to know in that word, and I'm glad you did that, is that everybody is chosen. It's not just the believer, just you over here, or just you over there. We are all chosen. It's all inclusive. That's the piece that I would love people to start understanding, is that we hear, well, you can, but you can't. And in all reality, when we read some of this stuff, like you are chosen people, you are all chosen. This is all, I hear what you're saying.
My kids would hear that as
right.
We're chosen and they're not.
That's right. And that's when we come back and said, you know what? God doesn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
So how can I help you understand what that word means? How can I help you understand what that sentence means? That you have the gift of God in you. You have the beauty of God in you. And let them understand it from an exclusive to an inclusive. And I think that's our job as we educate, is the scriptures are there. Okay, do we ignore them? Do we make apologies? Are we apologetic to them? Or do we help people understand it's all for you? Let me help you understand it from grace, love, and mercy, rather than let me help you understand it from the rules of legalism. So that's what I encourage us to do as leaders, to say, yeah, from a legalistic point of view, that's a chosen comment. From love, grace, and mercy, and who God really is, that includes you, always has, always will, regardless of how close you come to Him or not. So that's the piece I want people to understand, is that we need to speak about grace, love, and mercy. How do we use the word? So that's why, like, God's gifts, God's gift scriptures in Appendix 3, when we read these, people need to understand, yeah, this is who I am. There's no condemnation for me. God loves me. I can never be separated from God's love. So I thought maybe we could read a few of these out loud together and just kind of let the identity wash over us. Should we try that? And if one is upsetting or offensive, skip it. But I want you to try to kind of say, yeah, this is me. This is me. That's hard. Because a lot of us come to the table when we're broken, we come to the table with a sense of unworthiness. Whether that comes from the church or from family. So when we hear scriptures like, man, you are the most amazing thing in the world, it's like, well, that's true for you, but that doesn't really fit me. That's wrong.
Another thing I wanted to respond on that is, so often in Jesus' stories and parables, the chosen person was the outsider.
Was the
not
outsider.
the insider.
Exactly. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. When he spoke, every one of his stories, when you look at every one of his stories, excuse me, I am not contagious, this is just leftover from 2 weeks ago. He went to the outside. The woman at the well, Samaritan, hated people. A woman, even more hated than the people. A prostitute, okay, then you add that piece to there. And then he talks to her during the daytime, alone, and he goes to her and says, what I have, you can have. Just take it. It's for you. Enjoy it. And that's the part we have to continue to educate. When we see those words right away, that's legalism coming into place. That's religion coming into place. I totally agree with you that my son came to me and said, Mom, what do you mean chosen? Are you kidding me? We should all be blah, blah, and he just went into it. And I'm like, but you've got to understand, he's talking about you. But I had to take some time to explain it, rather than be afraid of that word. And so we as leaders need to do that. So then people can start removing the legalism out of their understanding. Start removing the religious component of the box that we put God in. So, yeah, that's funny, because I knew when I put that in there, I thought, that's going to ruffle some feathers, but I get it. So let's do Appendix 3. We'll start with the first one. There's no condemnation for me. Everybody. There's no condemnation for me. And I want you to soak into this when you're reading that. I can never be separated from God's love. We who are many form one body. I have wisdom from God. I am a new creation. I am God's child. I have every spiritual blessing. I have forgiveness of sins. I was chosen. I have been seated in the heavenly realms. I have been given the incomparable riches of God's grace. I was once far away, but have been brought near. I may approach God from freedom and confidence. I am light. I am holy and faithful. My joy overflows. I have glorious riches. I have the hope of glory. And I am rooted and built up. We'll stop there. And one of the reasons why these are really important is that when people say, I'm not worthy of God. I mean, you'll hear a lot of people, well, the more I do, the better I'll be in God's standing. Or, and that's, old guard, but very true, still very prevalent. You'll see a lot of your community, oh, no, that's just for you guys over there. I don't deserve any. Or, I missed church this weekend, so obviously I'm going to be skipped on the blessings and, blah, 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 blah. But they really believe it. It's not just a statement. I mean, there's real belief that literally if they don't do A, B, C, D in this order, they're screwed. And so when we are helping people to understand their rightful standing with God, love, grace, and mercy, part of their understanding is to understand how God sees them. You know? God says, you know what? You're my workmanship. You know, you're divine. You've been healed. You rock. You know? And if we can help people understand, like, wow, that's what I get? That's who I am? Just being me? I don't have to do anything but just be me? I didn't know that. Then all of a sudden, you know, God becomes different in the church and how they talk about other people. All of a sudden, next thing you know, love, grace, and mercy starts becoming their cush. They start behaving in love. They start behaving in mercy because they're starting to realize, oh, this is what Jesus did for us. This is what it looks like. I think another thing before we close out too is the appendix in here, they have a forgiveness prayer, appendix 5. And you know, when you're talking to people, it's like, you know what? Forgiveness is huge in just letting to be free in God. When we forgive, we release ourselves, and we also release the person that we don't forgive. And forgiveness is something that, you know, like my grandma, I hated my grandma for so many years, kind of for the abusive crap she would pull on us. I'm an identical twin, so my sister was always the loving human being, and I was like, what are you doing here? And for years, I lived in this, you know, you can have my most special doll, Annie, but Jen, you don't get anything. I mean, she would do stuff, it was really bizarre stuff. And for years, I just accepted that, like, that's my role. And I hated her. And I later, because she taught me a lot about God, inappropriately, but I hated her for that. And then I had to really learn to forgive her and say, you know what? I need to see her through grace, love, and mercy. With all her bumps and bruises. And when I could really forgive her, all of a sudden my relationship with God, you know, I felt less judged in the God arena. I felt less punched in the God arena. And I felt less abused. And so I had to really search back, though. I mean, it took a lot of years for me to realize, oh, that's kind of where that came from. So when people are dealing with stuff, and as we lead people, you may say, you know what? Maybe there's a place of forgiveness that needs to happen. Maybe there's a place of forgiveness for me to lead better, more understanding. So I put that prayer in there because there's power in letting go of our junk before we take the splinter out of somebody else's eyeball, or the 2x4, in my case. So the forgiveness prayer, I think, is really important, or a type of prayer. The last page, I think, is a great thing for a small group study. Appendix 6. This is about agape love, but the big thing here is, which I love, is that list 5 people in your current relationship that you would not invite to your dinner table. And they have to be alive. You can't say, you know, Hitler or whatever. I mean, you got to have somebody, but 5 people currently in your life that you're like, man, that'd be the last person I would want.
Just 5?
Just 5.
I only have one.
There you go. 5 or 1. Then what you want to do is you want to go back and then redo this whole process. You know, and what's interesting is that there's all the appendixes are exercises. They're processes of journaling, thinking, whatever, whether it be for you or for somebody else. But what happens is that it really allows you to just identify that 30,000-foot look-down view. If I'm going to help people to understand spiritual abuse in my church, if I'm going to be an instigator of change, if I'm going to be somebody who's going to model mercy, grace, and love, if we as a team are going to make a commitment to say, we are going to go out in the, all of us are different churches, except for you two, and say, I'm going to make a commitment to model mercy, grace, and love, so other people can learn how to do it as well. Whatever. I lost my thought. Where did I go? Yeah. Anyways, these exercises will allow you to do that. The other thing is too, as you counsel, you know, and you deal with people on one-on-one. Who else does a lot of one-on-one relationship stuff? I mean, these are the things too that you walk in when somebody says, you know, I really hate that SOB that did the blah, 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 blah. Then all of a sudden we can say, you know what? I relate to that. I get that, but let's go bigger. There's something bigger here. You know, you don't have to be a counselor to figure this out. But Jesus says, man, you know, just love, grace, mercy, and love. And use these exercises. But again, you'll go through this on your own. Get rid of what you don't want, keep what you do. Was today helpful at all? Kind of a bigger picture than just kid abuse, adult abuse. It's more of like, yes, it happens. We need to know who we are in God's eyes. We need to own those and be comfortable that that truth is for you. And then we need to share that truth with other people so they can be healed. So then they can walk around being grace, love, and mercy. That movie, Pay It Forward, same concept. Teach one person about being grace, love, and mercy. Because we hear a lot. As leaders, you hear, you know, and it's like, do I say something? Do I not say something? And I'm finding that saying nothing at all is just as damaging as saying something in agreement. So God has put on my heart, it's like, when I hear somebody bitch and moan, I'm now in a place where it's like, man, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry you feel that way. But let's talk about the real picture here. What's really going on? And I may lose that person in conversation, but I don't have a choice, because God said, you know what? They need to know about grace, mercy, and love. Because if they're crabbing to you, you know they're damaging other people. Am I right? You know, if you know about it, just like you did that one little boy, you know that other little boy who's the bully has pulled other stunts on other kids. He just got caught this round. And the adults do the same thing. They get caught this round. There was one woman who made a comment, a very snide comment about somebody's hair that looked like a wig, but it was really her hair. Very snide. And I remember like, and I said, you know what? That was unacceptable. And this is an old guard. This is old guard. Old money, old whatever. And I just said, shame on you. That's not okay to say that. And I'm a nobody. I mean, I just started there. And I thought, please, Lord, let me not get fired. But you know what? I couldn't. And I just said, don't you think that would hurt the other person's feelings? You know, and so her hair's a little different. Your hair's not looking too good either. Just kidding.
I really wish we had time to develop Appendix 1. That was very interesting.
Appendix, I mean, and again, these are all tools that what I would encourage you to do, really encourage you to do, is look at this in detail, because you're going to end up using parts of this someplace in teaching or in a one-on-one situation. The Appendix 1, distorted and true, you know, distorted views of God and kind of a truer view of God, and how parents and God, you know, I mean, it's really interesting, like the God of the impossible expectations. So as parents, here's the view: developing their children by focusing on correction, speaking to criticize, you know, rather than encouraging words. Then God is seen in the same way, one that's never pleased. A God that's, his standards are so impossible that you're never going to make it. So you start seeing, like, the trickle. You know, if a parent is teaching your kid this, where did they get that? But all of a sudden, you know, you'll hear kids say things, you know, it's amazing. It's amazing how a God and parent become one. and what you grow up with as a kid, that's how we perceive God, which is really a shaft for him, you know. But I would really look at your appendix and use these in, you know, some type of developmental whatever. These also can be done for kids, you just have to word them down. You know, especially if you're junior hires and senior high. This really works. Any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, I was just wondering how, you know, with middle school kids, you know, they say stuff to each other, and it's kind of borderline whether they're teasing or whether they're bullying, or, and then the kid who said it said, oh, I was just kidding, and, you know, I didn't mean anything, and anyway, how do you deal with, in other words, what do you say to the bully without making, you know, the bully, putting the bully down? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, do you want to answer that?
I think that perception is everything. And I think that if there's something that could be, especially at that age, I think if there's something that can be perceived, that could be by someone perceived as bullying, I don't think it's safe. I think it's unsafe. Now, how do you deal with that is a totally different question. Because to me, in any situation, you have to send a message to the victim as a leader saying, this will not be tolerated and this is a safe space and I intend to protect your safe space. But at the same time, you can't violate that safe space for a bully. And so there is as much grace, mercy, and love, if not more grace, mercy, and love, I think required in talking to and dealing with and shutting down the bully as there is with
And a lot of times what I'll
supporting the victim.
right, a lot of times what I'll do is somebody will make a snide comment, and you think, oh, that was a smart-ass comment, and enough to really, you know, hurt the other person. Now the other person's not going to show it, but you'll know kind of the nuance, and you'll say, hey, and then what I'll do is I'll just, in a minute, say, I gotta talk to you. And then I'll just leave the room when it's not obvious, you know, when stuff is going on. What I really work on is the empathy piece. Empathy and compassion for 7th and 8th graders and high schoolers is non-existent. So what you have to do, period, it really is not, and even for adults, but especially for that age, the disconnect. So what I'll just do is say, hey, you know what, I saw you talk to Chris, and that comment, dude, that was kind of harsh. Well, what do you mean? Then you kind of just say, well, say you were in that situation and somebody said, hey, you know, stupid, your hair is whatever, blah, 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 blah. Did you put it in an electric socket or grease it with whatever? You know, he's probably proud of his hair and you made fun of it. If your hair kind of was looking funky and somebody made fun of you, how would you feel? Well, you know, all right, so you're a bigger guy. Realize other people may not feel that way. So what you need to do is just be compassionate, be empathetic. You know what those words mean, then I explain those words. So what would another comment would have been? Then I make them walk through another comment. They usually say, well, I don't know, I don't have another, okay, here's a comment you can use. See how that worked? Yeah, okay, I get that. You know what? We gotta love our people right where they're at, you know? And I just try to not make them feel bad, but realize, you know what? I see why you said it, but this is where we really need to go with it. Okay, I'll try.
Correct me if my assumption is wrong, because I'm open to this. But it's always been my assumption that a bully is insecure of something, okay, and that's the bullying is the acting out of that. And so I have always been able to approach bullies with that perspective. I mean, even when I'm being bullied by somebody, like, so I work at trying to find out what pain it is that you know, the insecurity, whatever it is that they're lacking.
Yeah.
And if that can be addressed, and that's not an easy thing, I don't think.
It's not. It's really hard. And I think with kids, you may have an opportunity to kind of just be on an even playing field. Hey, I'm not mad at you. Just want you to know this is what you kind of went with that. Do you understand how that other kid might feel? Then as you start building a relationship, the next conversation is, man, that was how are you doing this week? Thanks for not making fun of whatever. Something bothering you these days? And then you kind of move into the underpinnings of what maybe have driven some of those statements. So it's kind of a double, you kind of work toward it. But you're right. You do have to hit that.
Well, but I mean, I don't know, is my assumption sound or is it
No,
unsound?
I think it's a great thing, but it just takes time.
Yeah.
The other thing you might want to add to that is, what were you trying to do?
Right.
Because, and did this miss the mark?
Yeah, just say, you were funny, not, and yeah, thanks for giving that a go, not, and dial it down, please.
Yeah.
Right, and you'll know the kid, you know what I mean? You'll know the kid, you'll know what you can hit on. I agree with that.
And Jen, I really appreciate your Appendix 3, the gifts, the God's gift scriptures that you've set out there. Because from that bully perspective, if they are lacking something, this is all internal. This is all of the self stuff.
Yeah.
And as a person who had to come to terms with sexuality that isn't mainstream,
Right.
these were the things that actually were seated in me deeply that I actually learned from church, even though I was being bullied by the church not knowing they were bullying me, because if you're closeted, nobody knows about that. Because I was struck by a recommendation that I received as I was seeking privilege of call with the UCC, and UCC has just been this breath of fresh air for me. After a 19-year sabbatical of not being able to work in my origin of faith family, where he wrote, it's amazing that this person has never turned away from the church, meaning me, but it was because of these basic truths that are they are planted deep in. So I think in one approach, working with a bully, is finding out where is it that they're lacking on these basic truths, and then seeing how do we build that up on that
And that's
individual.
one of the reasons why I put those in there. We don't teach those. A lot of places don't teach those truths. And if you understand who you are in God, then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I don't have to make other people feel small. And that's true in adults. When they really have a sense of worth and understanding in God, of the true unconditional love, of grace, mercy, and love, all of a sudden making other people feel bad becomes different. Because you do it out of anger, you do it out of a place of lonely. You do it out of a place of isolation. And so that's why the top-down version on this is working through those exercises, whether it be self or for others, is really helpful. It gives people like, oh, I didn't know I was loved that much. Duh. But it's true, we don't teach it. We really don't. A lot of places don't.
Well, and I would add to what you said, and coming from, the place I grew up, basically feeling total rejection. These were looking through these truths and these scriptures and these ideas and these principles are what were healing for me.
Exactly.
Those were the things that I clung to that made me go, I'm not crazy.
And that's, as leaders, we have to be teaching that.
Because when all of that happened, and when I was more or less asked to leave the church, what I felt was, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Was, you're not okay. Was, you're not right. Was, there's something wrong with you. Was that God didn't love you enough to make you perfect. And this is so at the core of what was healing to me, and what was...
That was a part of my call to ministry, was a sense of working inside the church instead of working from the outside of the church to make those changes. Very interesting, because I saw it at an early age. Boy, we are so wrong in so many places.
Yeah.
And yet the truths are there. So yeah, it's very interesting.
So as leaders, I challenge you this week, just really quick, just kind of bless you too before you go. But challenge you guys this, is to set up and say, how can I be grace, mercy, and love? Tell one other person your plan. Do it kind of the pay it forward model, and let people kind of rest in some identity stuff. It's like your kids. Approach it however, I get it. And just experiment with it. Just experiment. Also realize that as you feeling broken in any way still, use some of the exercises to go through and just to get yourself off the hook. Because we can't help broken when we're broken. But we can be free of broken. God's like, he doesn't want us broken. And it's a choice. I think the other thing too is like, do you have to wrestle through years of counseling? Yeah. You know, I mean, am I a counselor? Yeah. What I get people to do is like, you just have to choose that I'm forgiven, I'm loved, I have grace, and I have mercy. Done. Literally. Done. Now, if you need to process, some people do, go for it. But you can also just by choice saying, I choose love, grace, and mercy. And I choose to be that person, and I choose to teach other people to do that. And you'll be amazed, all of a sudden this like domino effect starts to occur. And it's the intentionality. So just thank you for being here. And I know it was kind of a big subject, so I hope you got something out of it.